big news coming in. US President Joseph Biden has called an emergency meeting with the G7 NATO leaders after Poland says a Russia-made missile killed 2 people in the country. This is a statement from Poland that has said that it was a Russia-made missile that has killed 2 people in the country. Biden calls for emergency meeting. Geeta Mohan continues to be with us. Geeta, G7, that means as close as a coterie of these so-called developed nations as it can get. But what will an emergency meeting like that has an agenda of?
Well, Pooja, the fact that all the world leaders have gathered here in Bali, they're all present here. And this indeed is an emergency situation because nothing can get bigger than the fact that there has been an attack and loss of life in Poland, which is a NATO member nation. And remember, NATO, as also all the NATO member states, had vowed that if there is a direct attack on NATO soil, any territory that is within NATO, then it would mean that NATO will intervene and that they are going to protect the territorial integrity of NATO member states, no matter what and no matter how. So now this is that very moment. President Biden calling for a meeting is because all the G7 leaders are here at present in Bali. So big meeting is right now to take place amongst the world leaders on how to move forward on this attack that has taken place on Polish soil. It is indeed disturbing because this could very well mean not just a very cold winter, it would mean a very harsh cold winter for Europe.
All right, stay on with me, Geeta, because as we can see that this is continues to get, the reactions that are coming in does not look good. And now joining me on the phone line this morning is diplomat Deepak Vora. He's been a former Indian ambassador to Sudan as well. Sir, when you're looking at these developments, Russia says it's provocation, Poland says it's very likely a Russian-made missile, Biden calls for an emergency meeting. Are we looking at the first signs of a global conflict?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Always a pleasure to be on your amazing channel and to learn from you. It would be a little premature to say that we are looking at a global conflict or World War III. Ma'am, there have been some developments that are of note. Even as the group of 20 venerables were meeting in Bali, minus Vladimir Putinsky, the Russians unleashed what the Ukrainians say were inexpensive Iranian kamikaze suicide drones called Shahed. Shahed is an Iranian word that means beloved. And they have taken out pretty much all of Ukraine's energy infrastructure. I saw some satellite images that the country is in total darkness. However, Shri Zelensky remains defiant. He made an address called Russia a terrorist state, was flexing and pumping his biceps, etc. The fellow is a circus joker. This is not the way how heads of state behave. Now, the U.S. Secretary of State has also said that if they want to talk, that is the Russians and the Ukrainians will decide when to do the talks. And so did Mr. Joe Biden say the same thing, that it is the call of the Ukrainians. Basically, what they are trying to say to Shri Zelensky is that the tail cannot wag the dog for too long. We have supported you, but we can't go on for the next 5,000 years, which is what you claim you will continue. Now it's time for you to start talking. So I believe that at the moment, this claim that some missiles have fallen on Polish territory, the Russians say it's absolute nonsense. Nobody really knows what's happening. The feeling here is that, number one, Washington wants to take control of the war back. It had outsourced it to Zelensky, who then began to blackmail his benefactors. You might recall that there was a media report about 2 weeks ago which said that in a June 2022 conversation, Zelensky said to the American president that, buddy, uncle, you are not giving me this, that, and the other. And apparently Biden lost his temper and said, listen, show some gratitude, man. And then, of course, Zelensky immediately issued a statement saying,
and a bigger question also, Mr. Vora, whether the West... Yeah, sure, sir. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Thank you. So basically, ma'am, what we are seeing is total confusion. On the one hand, everybody is speaking with more than one voice. Now, Shri Biden says we should have an emergency meeting to see what's happening. On the other hand, he's telling Zelensky, don't you dare control me. Then he says, let's make peace. Nobody really knows what is happening. My own assessment is, ma'am, that sooner rather than later, the Ukraine conflict will fade from public memory, just as the Palestinian issue has faded, the Kashmir issue has faded, and the world will go back to its tired old ways. We'll talk of climate change, we'll talk of health, etc., etc.
And a bigger question, sir, is the West also at some level playing any sort of game with regard to Russia, Ukraine, because they also have their own interests in mind? Deepak Vora, thank you so much as always for speaking to India today. Appreciate it, sir.